I'm David.
And I'm Dara.
Within college sports is where I start to wonder, like, is there a better way, a more efficient way for us to heal?
Throughout college, we learned to question everything.
I want to learn more. Like, I just dive in and, why, right? Everything was why.
Why were you getting injured so often?
Frequently, right?
And having the same injury.
Right.
I wanted someone else who felt like me, right? Who literally every day wanted to put a paper bag over my face.
It was to the point where I literally typed out on Google, resilience. Aloha. I'm David Woodward, physiotherapist and owner of Na'au Pono Physical Therapy. And at my side today and every day is my wife.
Aloha. I'm Dara Chun Woodward, esthetician and owner of Aesthetics by Dara. And together we are Na'au Pono Wellness.
And welcome to Optimize Your Na'au podcast, where health optimization is through connection.
Our connection to each other has facilitated healing in and around us. We believe that so much healing comes from connecting with ourselves, our sources, each other, and our environment. This is what we call Sinative Connection.
In this podcast, our guests share about their Sinative connections as we share our own individual journeys to health and resilience. I'm David.
And I'm Dara.
And before we start, we like to, start this off the same way we start off every opportunity of connection. And that's with taking a breath and just acknowledging our presence with each other.
So if you'd like to join us, take a deep breath into your na'au and just let it go. Okay, everybody. So on today's podcast, we just want to talk about our journey to Na'au Pono and how we evolved from Na'au Pono Physical Therapy to Na'au Pono Wellness.
Mm-hmm. And, just have an idea of where we all started from, where our roots are from, in our own respective professions, right? And then how we just came to be today, right? And how we integrated biohacking, right? And so, I started off as somebody that was pursuing athletic training, actually at a university in Missouri called Lindenwood University, St. Charles. And I would say, I've always had an interest within the human body itself, but I wasn't quite sure about where I would fit myself in. I associated myself with athletics mainly because that was familiar to me. I played, athletic events my whole life, volleyball mainly. That's what helped me get through school, helped me pay for school. I had a scholarship for volleyball, men's volleyball in college, as well as academics. And, upon different types of injuries that I encountered, within college sports is where I started to wonder, like, is this really the path that I want to go in, right? Is there a better way, a more efficient way for us to heal, right? It piqued my interests, right? And not to say that athletic training, didn't have a place in healing. It was just, I felt like there was more out there. And I was encouraged by one of my mentors, that was instructing at the time, and it was an introduction to athletic training at the time. And I quickly realized from there that, I think there's more to this than just treating athletes, right? And she encouraged to me that maybe this is not the right major for me. Maybe there's something more out there. I would encourage you, she said, to look a little bit more outside of that realm of athletics. And it was a little spooky at first. I had to kind of absorb that information, but at the same time, I was excited because I was like, oh my gosh, there's more out there, right? Where, all this time I was being around athletics and now I'm venturing into this open realm, right? And so, when I was applying for schools in general in college, it was very broad because I knew athletic training was part of it, but Physical therapy was a little bit interesting to me. I was debating whether to get into heavier into medicine, in other words, like being a physician. But once I got exposed to what physical therapy does, on that end, and how we were able to provide a healing environment, for people, changed my perspective on how I would want to approach healthcare.
Yeah, and I remember when you also got interested in possibly looking into orthopedic surgery.
Yeah, I was encouraged a lot through one of the surgeons when I was in the operating room with him. And, you know, one of my mentors always says, question everything, right? And it was something that, culturally, it was one of those things where I was like, so it's okay to question, right? Growing up, right, we were always told what to do, right? Mm-hmm. And to do this, because I said so kind of thing, right?
Or I think this would be best for you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But it was, once one of my mentors said that, it was like, it's just this big weight kind of lifted where I just felt more free.
Right.
And having permission, not that I needed it, but it felt like, oh, yes, I have this permission to just explore now. Right. And so it was something that was on my mind, especially when that specific orthopedic surgeon, because I was just firing questions, and he thought I was one of his medical students. That was a resident, in other words, that were trying to, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember coming back to my apartment, so excited. I was like, "Oh, Dara, hey, this is what Doctor So and So, was recommending," and you're like, you're at home at this point, right?
Yeah.
And we were just like, David, we had this plan. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, throughout college, I feel like throughout college, we learned to question everything.
Even the food that we were eating. And, I knew that, like we had to change lifestyle. I was drinking a lot. We were doing the college life.
Right.
We were eating anything that we could afford, drink anything that we could afford. And, but I knew that, what I was doing, I was eating healthier, but I was still practicing other things, such as, my drinking and staying up late.
Well, and we had no knowledge on vitamins and minerals and supplementation.
We thought what we were doing was enough.
Right.
Right.
And we also weren't learning that either.
True.
Right. Yeah.
And, especially when I made a transition from Lindenwood University to St. Francis University, which is in Pennsylvania, there's a big opportunity to learn about how we can heal a little differently in the alternative methods. We were able to meet up with a good friend later, and Dara's going to mention a little bit more within her experience through aesthetics and even just business, actually, because you went to Pennsylvania to study international business, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mm-hmm. And from there, we had an opportunity to meet an alternative healthcare practitioner, mm-hmm. Which piqued our interest even more on, there's more out there.
Well, it exposed to us how much we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, when I feel like I don't know something, it excites me, and I want to learn more. Like I just dive in, and why, right? Everything was why. You can even ask my parents; they'll still say like, "Oh, every time David would always ask why," right? And that interest is extremely genuine, because even till today, in relationship to what was going on back then, I wanted to know, mm-hmm. like, why was I feeling, so inflamed? Why am I having a hard time focusing on what I want to focus on, whether it be academics or even in my athletic performance? Right?
Why were you getting injured so often?
Frequently, right?
And having the same injury.
Right.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
Right. So what were the movement patterns, right, that we know now?
Yeah.
that you were habitually using, right? Inefficient movement patterns.
And the inefficient movement patterns really didn't click in my head until, I started to really, start my own practice. There were tons of learning opportunities that I took advantage of working at previous places that I had the opportunity to work with, other private practices. Fujian Lam, was a great foundation for me. They provided a very, welcoming environment. Their values paralleled a lot of the things that I believed in, and the family values that I really connected with was amazing, right? And they provided me so many opportunities to learn skilled manual therapy techniques. At that time, and it still exists, North American Institute of Manual Therapy. My specific mentor, Earl Petman, right? Wealth of knowledge, opened my eyes in the realm of physiotherapy and even beyond, and just the potential of who we can be as doctors, right? And even though he never had that title at the time,
Right.
He really, he extended his knowledge beyond, right, of what we traditionally see as PT.
Well, and it was interesting because while you were in school, there was that transition of Masters of Physical Therapy to Doctorate of Physical Therapy, which for me was very, very new.
It was so new that, I transitioned at a time where it was going into that transition, and it was part of me staying back in school for a little bit longer than what we intended. And, there's reasons for everything. And, I appreciate the moment, the time that was spent up there, the connection with people, the ability to just learn, from different frames and environments, right? But other than that, fast forward to, what we learned beyond, within the clinic, not just in the clinic, but within the college setting, right, and the clinical setting. That piqued my interest into other things too, right? Where, as we started kind of nearing towards, in the conversation between our transition from where we were working into Na'au Pono, right? When we started having a family, right, is where we really started to make dramatic changes. Dramatic changes within our diet, dramatic changes within our lifestyle, right? And a lot of that is connected with just how we experienced inflammation and what we saw and witnessed, experienced within ourselves and within our firstborn, right? And we were trying everything that we thought was right.
Well, and especially because I'm an esthetician, right? So seeing his eczema show up on his skin was
really severe.
Was really traumatizing for us, and my journey through aesthetics started out that way too, where I was addressing the inflammation and the trauma going on in my skin. And at the time, I didn't know very much about it, right? And neither did my parents. And, so the thing to do was go to the dermatologist and at the time, get antibiotics and then try another antibiotic and then try a topical cream and then try, a topical antibiotic with an oral antibiotic. And then they put me on Accutane. And we were together. We have been together since we were 17. And I remember the moment that it must have been in my 6th month of being on Accutane, right? And you telling me, you're starting to smell different.
Yeah.
And, my lips were chapped and I already had digestive issues from when I was a kid. And then it just became more and more with the more antibiotics. And the longer I took the Accutane, my period started changing. I had terrible migraines, terrible cramps, horrible dreams. I remember that part. And I remember sharing that with you. And that's when we really started to question, right? Is this the best thing? So I stopped. I stopped the Accutane. We graduated from high school and then went off to college. And at the time, I got accepted into the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, where I was, the intention was to be a pilot. And luckily, during our senior year of high school, my dad bought my mom and I facials for Valentine's Day, and I had no idea what a facial was. Never heard of it. Had never been to a spa. And so my mom and I went for a facial, and that very first facial, I remember how much of a difference it made in my skin just by her cleaning out, the junk. And, she educated me about nourishing the skin, right? Which I think, when you're battling acne, the only thing you're concentrating on is taking away from the skin, getting it off the skin. And you're not thinking about nourishing your body nonetheless, right? Or nourishing the skin. And so then fast forward, we get to college. And then my skin got worse because, like you said, we were living the college life, eating crap.
Whatever we could, afford. And, it's what we were familiar with as well, right?
Yep.
So.
And then I decided to not pursue my aviation career. Got my license, got my private pilot's license, and then started looking for, other avenues because aesthetics was always in the back of my mind, especially after that first facial. I connected so much, with being at the spa, having a facial. And I wanted someone else who felt like me, right? Who literally every day wanted to put a paper bag over my face so that I didn't have to go out looking like that. Yeah. Helping someone feel the way that esthetician made me feel. Hope, which was, there was hope that there was something other than continuing to take medication or putting these drying creams right on my skin. And so I decided to start applying for business school. Got accepted to Washington and Jefferson in Washington, Pennsylvania. Right. And like David said at that time, he got recruited to play Division I volleyball
at St.
Francis, who was one of the first to have a doctorate program in physical therapy.
Yeah, well, right? It was one of the emerging, accredited schools at the time. Right?
Yeah.
So
and that's how we ended up in Pennsylvania, and that's where in Pennsylvania, through someone else who was from Hawaii, who at that time lived in Pennsylvania, introduced me to her brother-in-law, who was a simple chiropractor and so knowledgeable. I still call him a witch doctor because that's, we grew up in, always going to the doctor, right? We grew up very much in Western medicine. There was a little bit of Eastern, very little, maybe with some herbs, but not the kind of stuff that we know of today. And so he really opened up my eyes, to lots of alternatives, right? That was like such a taboo word, especially back then. I mean, we graduated high school in 2001. And so seeking out health alternatives, it kind of seemed dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It seemed like we were taking a risk. Like, alternative to going to the doctor, or an alternative to taking an antibiotic or an antiviral, or right? And he taught me so much because he and his wife helped a lot of people in their community, right? These are small towns in Pennsylvania, with home births. And just him and his wife explaining to me the importance of, the process of conception and birthing, and then the afterbirth. Yeah. Which I knew zero about. Well, I mean, we were still in college, but it was never something I had even heard of. And that, like David said, it piqued our interest in alternative medicine, right? And then, we took in a lot of that information. Well, we thought we were healthy. We thought we were eating the right things. Right? We would have whole wheat toast in the morning.
I mean, this was what was projected in the media. And
a fruit,
yogurt,
a boiled egg.
I mean, we peanut butter on wheat toast.
Right.
And that was what was taught to us to provide the best source of protein and fiber, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure you have your energy, to start your energy in the day.
Right.
Right.
I mean, luckily, conceiving our son was not hard. It was very easy.
Yeah.
And, but when he came out, right, with the eczema, that had such a
impact
on us, because
very much.
I remember the doctors saying, it's normal. It's going to go away. It probably is in our genes. And it was just an explanation that we didn't accept. There was something in our Na'au that felt like there's something else to explore. There's something else going on. There's more that we can do about this. And that's when I remember you Googled.
Yeah. I mean, it's after our son, we were just going through this whole process with his eczema. We were just so tired, of being tired
and sick. We were both working.
That's right.
A lot.
And
7 days a week.
We were getting sick every other day or every other week, excuse me. And, we were still trying to put in hours because we had goals of getting married or we were married at the time. But
so just to put it into perspective, we bought our house, did little renovations, got married, and got pregnant within 3 months of each other.
Yeah. Which is a pretty exciting time, right? My dad always said, "Oh, you guys are smart. You guys all hurt one time." I remember telling him it's either that or you're hurt for a long time. But no, we made it, and we persevered, obviously.
Yeah.
Right?
But like you said, we were tired and we were sick a lot.
The thing is like it was to the point where I literally typed out on Google resilience, right? And it was so funny. The first person that showed up, I'm not sure if the algorithms were starting around that time, but I'm sure it had some influence. But Dave showed up. Dave Asprey. If you folks don't know, Dave Asprey is known as the father of biohacking, right?
Who started Bulletproof?
Started Bulletproof and Bulletproof coffee, Bulletproof diet, and he now hosts the biohacking conference, which is now in Orlando. And I from that time, right, I remember watching his YouTube videos because it was still just YouTube at the time, and I was like, this is a weird looking guy.
And he was talking about weird things.
So I'm saying, and I was like, what is this guy talking about? Putting
yak butter,
fat,
right,
in coffee, right,
in coffee,
and saying how healthy that is for your heart and for your body.
I feel like everything he was talking about was like, fat, which was totally
everything
the
was
opposite.
Against what I learned in school.
What we learned,
like almost everything,
what we were doing, yeah.
And he shared his story too, and his journey, and with his wife at the time, right, Dr. Long,
trying to get pregnant,
and I was like, wow, like, is it it's worth a try. Right?
I wasn't willing.
No, and I know you weren't. But I was kind of like, oh.
When I saw you making that in the kitchen, I was like,
she's talking about Bulletproof coffee,
right? The coffee.
The first time I made the coffee, in my mind,
I was like, I'm not drinking that.
Oh yeah, because when you first looked at it, this is before I blended.
Well, but it wasn't even MCT oil that he used at first.
Fairness, right? I looked at it and was like, oh, I can. We have this readily available oil, right? Coconut oil is made here. We have our own coffee here locally too. So I just threw everything in, made it exactly the way. And I really didn't take into the concept of grass-fed butter, right? Which makes a huge difference, by the way, right? Not even just
Medium
within your
chain
coffee.
triglycerides,
And medium chain triglycerides
None of that.
specifically from, right, like C8 and what's the role of medium chain triglycerides, and there's different chains, right? And responsibility of, knowing which ones to intake. But anyway, I used local coffee. I used regular coconut oil, which had flavor, by the way, like a coconut flavor.
It was very coconutty.
Very coconutty.
Very coconutty.
It was very oily. I may have messed up.
It's very oily.
I may have
greasy.
messed up the ration, the ratio, if you will. But it was something that was different, and I was so excited about it. And I blended it and everything. I did majority of what Dave recommended at the time, and I remember drinking it, thinking like, "Oh, this is thick
and oily."
And I remember I noticed a change like in my brain function, and it worked for a while, but I still crashed like around that midday, 2:00 around there. And I was like, I felt like I could use my brain better, but it's just not working as efficient as what it probably could, as what he's advertising it as. Now, given I was still drinking it and I was still eating the other stuff, but there was something to the coffee part that was sticking out to me. And because I wasn't really a heavy coffee drinker either, but how he was talking about it seemed too good to be true. And so I tried it out, and ended up buying one of his bundles of it was only coffee and brain octane at the time, and he had XCT oil too. I think it's still around, but I ordered that just to start with, and committed to the grass-fed butter, which is more expensive, right? And when I blended it, I mean, it totally changed my life.
Yeah. And there was definitely a synchronicity of things happening. I decided to leave the spa and the salon that I was working for and go out on my own, which of course then required more energy,
right,
from, on my part. Our son Isaac was 2 at the time.
right.
And we did that. And then we got into personal development for the very first time.
Yeah.
So it was
everything.
just...
everything happened all one time.
Yeah.
And this was something that, and I know that this is going to be a very, repetitive topic that we always talk about, but manifesting.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we were literally manifesting a change. So, I feel like all of that coming one time, right?
Yeah.
We wanted that. We were ready for something to shift in our life.
However, it did challenge us, physically,
absolutely.
especially, right? We didn't feel like we had the energy levels required.
Yeah.
But we did it anyway.
And what it started with the coffee.
Yeah.
And from there, we started doing more research. I started doing more research on the diet part. Like, what is it about the saturated fats that I should experiment with? I always had an interest in experimentation, especially when it comes to the human body. And so I tried it out. I ate more avocados. I included more butter in our diet.
Well, and we started making bacon and eggs for breakfast. Right.
Well,
so
that dramatically shifted.
Yeah. I remember us going through our pantry, right, and taking away, that was pretty much like 80% of our pantry.
We donated all our canned goods, and, it still served for others, but we recognize that, that's not how we want to live our life, is through having,
well, and bottom line, we knew what we were doing was not working.
Right.
So we just committed to making a drastic change.
Right. And at that time, we still do eat, more on the vegetables end, but we didn't really quite recognize like what the role was for the vegetables, for the fat, for the, what kind of fiber do we put in our diet,
and the
right?
timing of
timing,
it. Right.
And once we got educated on it, that's when we started to really recognize change. In our brain function, more importantly, our gut function, and how it connects with our brain, right? Our Na'au, right? And so this was just a game changer in so many different ways.
And can I say, I mean, this is about the time when honestly our sexual, for me, right, my libido started to increase.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, to me, I was thinking, well, you know, maybe my body's just trying to tell me, let's have another baby. But, you know, really our connection intensified.
I felt like I was more present.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that cloudiness that I, would typically have. Didn't make that connection on, how much diet was a big part of it, right? And environment as well. Recognizing, Dave always talked about toxic mold. I didn't even know, that how much mold can make a big, have a big influence on our health and our brain function, our gut function. And, when we started making those changes, whether it be supplementation, right? Like the activated charcoal was one of the things that we were first introduced to, or even just getting quality air, right? And how that made a big difference on, recognizing that nosebleeds are not a common thing.
Not normal.
It shouldn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean like, that's just a normal thing for me to grow up with. It's like, that's there's something there. Like, we gotta do a little bit of diving in and see where the source of that is coming from.
Well, and we forgot to mention, we started feeding Isaac the same thing we were eating, right? Bacon and eggs, avocado.
Well, actually, we fed it to him first.
Yeah.
It sounds really bad.
Son, you try this first.
Yeah. If you want to find out something first, try it on your kids. No, but we did.
No, and and the thing what we want to mention is his eczema literally went away within about 2 weeks.
No, it was less.
Well, and he started. Everybody, we would always comment like, "Oh my God, your baby, he's so big and healthy," but he was just
inflamed. Yeah, for sure. But I would say I noticed a change within a few days in the same week. Like, how do you explain eczema going away within a matter of days? Where we were struggling with it for months, and it felt like years, but it was months.
Yeah.
And, it was painful to watch him go through. He was in pain.
Yeah. And that really opened my eyes on aesthetics. I mean, we bought him La Mer cream.
All the expensive stuff to try and, address it from the outside.
Right. Which it wasn't working. And so when I saw that what we were putting inside his body was making a difference outside, that's what really, drove me to change my mindset about aesthetics and really, how we are as a system and how it's all connected.
And, we did get exposure to another alternative health practitioner that helped to get whole food supplementation. And, we were trying it, that route for a little while too, before we started diving into, how we can get more specific about our diet and supplementation, right? For ourselves as well as, for our son, right? And, once we had knowledge on that, things just became a lot more simpler, Yeah. We didn't have to wake up feeling
tired
and anxious
and
not
ready for the day. Yeah.
I hope that everything, we don't have to function off of, uncertainty as much, right? Especially when we put things, the accountability on ourselves a little bit more, and take responsibility on, at least for me, I felt like, when I feel a little bit more in control of what I put in my body, right? Or what I expose myself to, it's a little bit easier or simpler for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's why we created Na'au Pono Wellness, right? At first, it started off as convenience. So I mentioned that I left the salon and the spa that I was working at. And then David did a men's retreat and was very motivated to also start his own, with the intention of true wellness, right? Because we were going on that journey, and there has got to be, right? We were thinking there has got to be a lot of people who think they're doing the right thing and still not getting the results that they're wanting, right? And we were thinking, well, maybe we can help.
Yeah. And, when you talk about that retreat, that's actually where I first experienced how impactful fasting is. Yeah. And that was my first experience on fasting for 3 days. I didn't have anything. We were offered at that, just a quick thing. In regards to this retreat, we were offered to make sure that you had something like they had granola and water, right? And for me, I was kind of like, nah, I get them. I know what I'm doing, right? Not knowing that, I need some kind of sustenance. I thought I would be okay. And not that I wasn't, as a matter of fact, that changed my life because I was able to really manifest a lot of things that, what we're doing here today in Na'au Pono.
Yeah.
And
During that.
I literally started writing down. I spent one whole day when I was fasting just figuring out and organizing my thoughts on what I wanted to create. That this is where Na'au Pono was really born, was during those 3 days.
During your time of solitude.
Yeah. With nothing to eat or drink. Things were so clear, and, I didn't realize, the science behind of what was, within fasting and autophagy, right? And its role, within that and how we utilize those practices yet. But I witnessed it firsthand, and things became so clear. I didn't have the name yet. I actually had help from, a really close friend that, is very well versed in the native Hawaiian community and in Hawaiian language. And he was able to put together, in words, what I was really feeling like I wanted to create, what we wanted to create.
Your intention, our intentions.
And that's where it started. The birth of Na'au Pono started there. And all it was a matter of was literally putting in 2 weeks notice right as I got home, from the retreat. And I was ready to go. I felt ready after that, right?
Yeah, and so we were thinking, well, since he wants to go out on his own and I was already on my own, what's the point in paying two rents, right? When we can just share the same space. And on your birthday, we found this space.
Yeah.
Didn't even really look at the terms of the agreement, just signed it.
Actually, it was funny because we actually did a lot that day. We started the business on July 13th, my birthday, as well as looked at this location on the same day.
Yeah.
So
it was again in our mind. It was in our minds. It was done. Right. There were no other options. We were going to come home that day with our business open.
We were so focused.
And we did it.
What we wanted to do. Right?
We did it, and we started working right away because now we needed income. And the weekend of our grand opening, found out that we were pregnant with our second child.
Yeah.
Which was also stressful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But again, a lot of things all happening at one time.
Yeah.
I think all of these events, happening, together, they have a purpose. I feel like even though it feels very overwhelming at times, we somehow figure out a way to remain, focused. I don't know how else to say it, but there's no other choice. But the other part too, though, is I think we recognized how important the connection between both of us is to have this work, right? And especially when we own these businesses together, it's even more important, to remain present and connected with each other.
And remind each other of our priorities and continue to take accounting of those priorities and readjust every day because things come up.
Absolutely.
Right? Every day.
Every day.
And so fast forward to our daughter Skylar being 5 weeks old. And then you got invited.
Yes. So I got invited to go to the conference. Everything was paid for. All I just needed to do was get a ticket.
To the
was it biohacking.
Was it biohacking?
No, I'm sorry. It was the Bulletproof conference at the time, yeah. And that's where I started, committing to biohacking and its role that it would play within Na'au Pono. We were playing around with the idea, in the beginning, I'm not going to lie. But
When there
when
was
I went,
fear on how much we have
oh,
to
it was,
invest.
yeah,
That was huge.
a lot of it was investment,
Yeah.
was how much would it
Mm-hmm.
cost, and where would we start, and what, like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and especially when you're so excited about this change, right? You're wanting to adopt all kinds of different things all at once. But yeah, that's where I really started to get excited and noticed like how all of this can synergize. I didn't see why I wouldn't be able to implement it, right away. Especially when I got back from the conference, and we did. We started with, selling some coffee in the beginning, and people had a hard time figuring out how does coffee fit in with physical therapy, right? And for a while, I mean, even up until recently, there's some people that try to figure out, like, how does all this relate to just physical therapy, or how does this relate to aesthetics, right?
Right.
And these are all good questions that we like to answer, in person, but a lot of it has to do, with, what does resilience look like for you, right? Within your goals of, right, whether it be wellness, physical therapy, or even aesthetics, but within your skincare. When it comes down to it, a lot of it comes down to what we put into our body, what we surround ourselves with, right? To us, we don't see any delineation, right? All of these
No,
things
absolutely
connect to
not.
each other.
Yeah. I mean, how you feel and how you look are related, right? You feel like you feel good, you look good, you make better decisions, right?
That's it.
And you move better, you can do more. And so our first tech that you brought home, right, from that conference was the Nano V.
Yeah.
That was
I think that was one of the first ones I brought home. I think before that, the Vibe plate was something that I was interested in, and was within a budget that,
Yeah.
that we were comfortable with.
Well, the
Right?
Nano V was not in our budget, but
No, it was
you
not.
felt such a
It
huge
was,
difference.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
remarkably different. And, the guys over at ENG, such knowledgeable and just supportive.
Yeah, and
I really,
they're still so supportive and still a part of our journey. And I think one of the things, especially for me, right, because David was reading this stuff and listening to this stuff
Yeah.
all day long, and I wasn't. And so there was, right, for me, so much fear, like, oh my God, I'm not going to know enough, or I don't know enough. How do I talk about this with our clients and our patients? And, the answer for me was to literally become a product of our products. And that became my commitment. And no, we still don't know everything.
Yeah.
We're going to constantly learn. And that's become something that we actually strive
Yeah.
for today, is to not know everything and continue to question everything.
Well, especially when we're going into a different opportunity of learning. I notice that every time we go into it feeling like we don't learn, or we don't know anything. I mean,
Is when we learn.
being able to absorb information is way easier,
Yeah.
And so, what I want to make sure that we talk about too, though, is just about what we're doing within this podcast, right? And one of the prime questions that I would say that we would want to ask, our guests, and maybe that's something that we can talk about too, right? Is, what optimizes your Na'au, right? And, you folks have probably heard us use Na'au a lot, right? And especially those of us that are not from Hawaii, right? Any of the islands of Hawaii, and may not understand it simply because it's a different language, obviously, right? But within the Hawaiian culture, one word typically doesn't have one meaning. There's multiple meanings, or kona, right, behind a lot of different words that we use. And it's no different, with our name, right? Na'au Pono. And in our Na'au, right, our most people would relate it to gut, right? But we see it more than just guts. It's what feels right. It's what we feel connected to, right? And our Na'au is something that you can feel, right? And experience, and which is one of the reasons why, one of the things that I want to ask is, what optimizes it for you? It's a genuine question I want to ask everybody, because, it's different for almost everyone, right? So let's start it. What optimizes your Na'au, Dara?
Well, right now, what optimizes my Na'au is my connection to me. My goodness, I'm 40 years old now, and only now am I really starting to understand the concept of working smarter, not harder.
I agree.
If I knew how really effortless it is to manifest and attract, it is. It's as simple as feeling it and being connected to me and my intention and being in alignment with what I want. That's what optimizes my Na'au right now.
Yeah, and that's perfect that you say that, because it's a right now thing, right? And sometimes these things evolve, right? But yeah, for me, what optimizes my Na'au, actually, Dara took my answer. I was going to say myself. No, I'm just kidding. But I'll be honest with you. In addition to that, I would say optimizing my Na'au right now is connecting with you, right? And I just, I show gratitude every day. Not even just to you, but I do it when in my meditation. That connection with you makes me feel like I have all the energy in the world, right? Because I feel like I'm not doing it alone. Where sometimes we can feel that way, especially when things are overwhelming. We can tend to kind of corner ourselves, right? And feel like, oh, I got to do all this by myself. But really, that connection with you, feel like I can optimize my Na'au, right? I can feel like I'm at my best all the time. We can check in with each other, right? And so, yeah, that's what would optimize my Na'au at this moment.
Yeah, so we're so excited to continue this conversation.
Right.
When we talk about optimizing our Na'au through connection, and all the different biohacking, pieces that we have experienced along our journey, and how it affected us and optimized us. So, yeah, so please stay tuned and join us again.
Thank you for coming by. And yeah, this is the Optimize Your Na'au podcast, right, at Na'au Pono Wellness, where we optimize our health through connection. Mahalo. Mahalo for listening to Optimize Your Na'au podcast here at Na'au Pono Wellness.
And you can join us and see us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Na'au Pono Wellness. We'll see you again soon.
Aloha.